we have a very interesting speaker who spent more than about close to 15, 16 years in the supermarket, hypermarket space, and who's trying to change the way India shops for their grocery staples every day. So please welcome Mr. Mohit Kampani, the CEO and Managing Director for More Retail. Today, our session partner is Arklane, founded by 5 echelons in the real estate and corporate leasing realm, namely Rehan Haq, Tarun Narula, Shriram Monga, Devan Girdhar, and Nikhil Agarwal. Arklane today is a broking firm with the largest network of working relationships with developers and retailers across the country. So Mohit, we were chatting about when you were telling me you've been in the supermarket business and the hypermarket business and the grocery retail business from 2006. So what prompted you to move from the FMCG side of the business to the organized retail? So how did the journey start?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Pankaj. Kind words. The reason for the switch was purely selfish. I think as a manager in my early 30s, I thought sunrise industry, the possibility of making a mark there is much greater than this overcrowded space of FMCG from a talent pool perspective. And it was actually basis that I made the move. And in my last organization in FMCG, which was Colgate, I had the opportunity to visit a lot of international markets where I saw self-service format, in a fairly mature manner. And I said, look, now that this has started in India, this is probably the best place to go and kind of plant your flag and ride that industry to its next level of growth. So I made the shift primarily because I believe that it had a long-term future in India with a lot of area to cover.
Way back in 2006, and we are in 2021 today. This industry has really seen lots and lots of things happening around. It's somehow still never settled because maybe because I've been also been part of the journey alongside working with you and your other past organizations which you worked with when you set up the supermarket and hypermarket business. We've seen it's a tough business, probably because the margins are thin and the competition tends to be a lot more of your next door shopkeeper, kirane wala dukan, or the local baniya, what we call, and the others. It's been a tough business. So from 2006 to 2021, if you really map out that journey, did you expect it to be so volatile, or did you expect that this was expected that it was going to be this volatile, or you expected that it will be a smooth sailing?
No, obviously one went in with a vision of far more smoother sailing than this. But there's, Pankaj, there's a very interesting reason for this. If you look at self-service grocery retail in all large emerging markets, I won't even say mature markets, almost all of them, grocery retail, the chains, the top 3 chains, actually other than Poland, are all homegrown brands, which have been started by an entrepreneur who has taken them to maturity. India is actually possibly one of the only markets where large diversified conglomerates started the grocery industry. And all the big names, the Goenkas, the Tatas, the Birlas, all of them, and of course the Ambanis. So you were not born out of a vertical grocery organization. You were actually born out of very large horizontal diversified conglomerates. Okay, other than of course a couple of them like the Future Group and of course DMart. They are more vertical in that sense. So the learning curve has been steep for the industry, and I think part of it has been because diversified conglomerates and as direct to consumer as you can get. So it's a pretty big swing for them. So I think the first few years the learning curve was steep, costly, but probably has now put the industry in a place where we are far more mature, and at least I think the top 3 or 4 retail brands have found their consumer value propositions and now are rapidly scaling up finally.
You mentioned, and that's very interesting, that it's all the large business. Mostly, it was the large business conglomerate, which is the Goenkas, the Ambanis, and Tatas, and the others who went into that business. But really, at one point, it was really Kishore Biani's Future Group, which was the forefront of organized retail in terms of the supermarket and hypermarket business, which was Big Bazaar and the others. But a lot of these companies, great corporate governance, had the best talent, could do integration, back-end integration and front-end integration very well. Capital was never a challenge. Rahejas came up with a Hypercity as well. But somehow, most of these guys started falling out. And unlike any other retail business, the maximum fallout happened in this business. So really, what are the three key learnings, which has been really, if you were to pick it up from which is different, which they go on going forward, it's always there. There are many people who come into the business, but it's eventually maybe not, it's not a monopolistic, but it's always a duopolistic, or a 2 or a 3 large firms always remain. But like in the other retail businesses, we've still not seen so much of consolidation happen yet. There are lots of players as well. So what it takes to emerge as winner of those 2 or 3 businesses, you have seen, because you worked with both the successful ones, right? You worked with the Spencers and you worked with more as well, who still continue to be invested in this business.
Yeah. So Pankaj, I think, the long and short of it is, in the early 2000s, when these businesses were being incubated as, in these diversified conglomerates as the next wave of growth for them. Remember that we were only 10 years out of liberalization, and none of them had deep-rooted B2C businesses. So while they had talent, they had capital, and they had the ability to scale up, I think the capability to ride B2C businesses had not yet innately been born in them. And that's because of the 80s and 90s eras from where these business houses were built. Now, if you were to incubate an industry like some of the digital businesses which are being incubated in these large business houses, their ability to be B2C first is far more mature and developed than it was 15 to 20 years back. I mean, that's really how I think about it. About 10 years into the making of this industry, which is about 2015-16, I think there were top 4 or 5 retail brands which had reached a threshold where, at least at a business level, they were starting to make money, certainly at an EBITDA level, and some of them even, all the way up to PAT level, which is a big thing. And as a result, the last 5-6 years, while only some of them have, sped up the financials and really seen strong growth and delivery of profits and shareholder returns, some of the others which have moved more sideways have actually not lost too much money also. So their ability to sustain has continued, Pankaj. Yeah. Now you can question, why some have gone up and the others have remained sideways. And there are a variety of good reasons. But let me just say that for most of the brands in the industry, each year, at least in the last 5-6 years, each year has been better than the previous one. Okay, now the rate of, or the incrementality of the growth has been different for different retailers. And I think the better ones have prospered more. But at least now as an industry, we are at that stage where we are improving year upon year.
So you're saying now, is there going to be a significant bull run for people who have invested in this business? Or is it still going to take time for it's going to be painful still?
No. I think now you are going to see significant unlocking of value. I mean, you belong to my industry as much as I'm part of it. You will see the top 3 or 4 brands accelerating expansion like never before, because they're extremely confident of their business model. They have a very, very good understanding of their consumers. They're using digital like never before to scale up. And, digital is vastly misunderstood. I think our industry is one where we've had the advantage, or we can use the digital advantage massively to scale up, because a lot of our processes are very routine.
Right.
For instance, we process 100,000 supplier payments a month, invoices, right? Now that's something which leads itself to robotic automation quite easily, and therefore our ability to scale up today is much easier than it would have been 10 years back. So I think penetration is going to drive growth like never before. till about 4-5 years back, growth was driven more by improving unit economics, same store growth, things like that. I think those the best brands have now tackled. So they've got the unit model. So now it's going to be penetration, which means a lot more opening. And which means naturally you'll go outside the metro.
You'll get one. So, you mentioned that, penetration is going to be the key thing. The organized business is always there in the metro cities, and everybody talks about Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, and the others. And, I know we work very closely with you, and we've seen that your expansion has been very different from many others. You've straight away jumped from the metros and jumped onto the backbone of tier 2, 3, 4 cities together. Most time we find organized retail jumping from taking the step in saying, okay, we now in the metro cities, let's go to the state capitals, then we'll go to tier 2 cities, then we'll go to tier 3, and then tier 4, or populate a region. They take up a state and they populate a region. Whereas we've seen with you, you've started cutting deep into the market and going deeper and deeper. What's happening there? Is there suddenly a euphoria of demand coming in, or stability is more, or is it the market opportunity which you want to capture before anybody gets it? What's it like? What's the reason?
So I think two things. Food and grocery is never about a city. It's always about a catchment. So to my mind, if a catchment is attractive and it sits in a tier 3 city, it's as attractive to me as long as, it makes supply chain sense. If it doesn't make supply chain sense, then obviously you won't go into the city, which is a hygiene. So it's always about the catchment, number one. Number two, which has been more of a learning the last few years, is that the consumer is not very, very different in a tier 2 or tier 3 city compared to a metro. This is the one I must admit has been something new to us. And this is including categories such as apparel. Okay. And now, of course, I'm talking about the mass market. So I'm not talking about
absolutely.
Luxury and all. Now, when that happens, which is the consumer behavior fundamentally is not very, very different, other than, nuances of localization, etc., especially on food, it makes expansion a little bit more palatable into these cities. So if supply chain works, consumer behavior by and large, okay, in most of the categories that we retail is very, very similar, and the catchment economics works. There's no reason not to look at it. The icing on the cake, and that's been the really recent big surprise, is they're extremely open to e-commerce, and they're displaying omni-channel behavior very similar to their metro cousins. Okay, now that's been a surprise. So you would go in with a mindset that in a small city, why would they buy online grocery? Okay,
yeah.
But the consumers are surviving. Their triggers are very, very similar to consumers in the metro. They also price their time. They also look for convenience. They're also value oriented. So very, very different consumer behavior is driving this expansion, Pankaj. So these two, they're just located in different cities, but very similar consumer behavior.
And is the shopping basket and the buying pattern, like you mentioned, they're very similar in their behavior, but is the shopping basket as rich, or in terms of rich, in terms of the size of the basket as big? And is the behavioral pattern in terms of consumption, are they also willing to upgrade their basket as well as they go by? Consuming better and better?
Yeah, it is. So this is another surprise for us. So, 2 weeks back, I give you a small example. I was at our Bardwan store, and there was a 6 kg detergent pack on promotion and a huge display. And I was asking the store manager, I said, this is a Sunlight Market, which is one of the cheapest detergents. And he showed me the contribution. It was not very different from what you would have in Calcutta. Okay. Now this is amazing. And these are packs which would not be available in general trade there. So the consumer hasn't had even access to these packs. But the fact that we are selling them, they're seeing the same value as somebody would in a metro. So the drivers fundamentally are very similar.
Very similar. And when you mentioned, does the e-commerce help you to understand the consumer dynamics before you enter a new market? Does that give you more insight before you decide to enter a new market to put up a store? Or is it the other way around? Or you put up a store and then did you see the online telling you more feedback in terms of what the consumer shopping behavior is? going to be?
So Pankaj, particularly in grocery e-commerce, in a lot of these cities, we are making the market. So we are market makers. So,
Okay.
there isn't really, data there which we can, study and get out of there. So we are making market there more than often. And there in e-commerce, yes, there is some divergence in the demand. In tier 2, tier 3 markets, the demand is very similar to offline. In the metro markets, the online demand does tend to be a slightly different assortment, which is premium. So that's probably the only nuance.
So what happens to the smaller, or I would say not smaller, I would say niche players in each of those markets, particularly like metros, because we still, when you come to travel to a Delhi or a Mumbai or a Bangalore, particularly when I know Delhi and Bangalore very well, there continues to be local players like a Modern Bazaar and a Simply Namdharis in Bangalore continue to they continue to be there. They continue to understand the consumer's local palate because they're very localized. So do they tend to be a challenge, or is there a market size available for all of us all of them to coexist with you? Or
Yeah,
when I mean you, I mean organized players, large players like yourselves.
Yeah. So, independents will be as strong in India like they have been in the US. And, of course, their consumer is very different. If you were to take that, they serve the top 8% of the consumers with, household incomes greater than 20 lakh rupees per annum. There is a 92% below that also. And if you take out people above the poverty line, 65% of metro is there in the middle. So answer to the question is, of course, the market is large enough, and none of them have even reached scale. Everybody's expanding. We're underpenetrated. Pankaj, simple matter of fact is India has 1,000 hypermarkets. That's it. Which is probably what you would get in a very large state in the United States. So we have a long way to go.
And if you're saying India is only 1,000, which is equivalent to a state in the United States, where would you peg the number for next 3 or 5 years? Where do you think the potential is? How much can it go? 10,000, 15,000, 5,000?
Look, if you look at most of the large metros, the really large metros. Now I'm talking about the 10 to 25 million kind of buckets, the top 6 or 8 cities. There is no reason each one of these will not be supporting anything less than 250 to 500 stores. Okay, each. So if you do the maths and you take it up to the top 60, okay, there is no reason why we will not be between 10 to 15,000 hypermarkets. Just in the top 50, 60 urban centers. And there, of course, tier 3, tier 4, there is a lot of potential. So, and I think this is all going to happen in the next 5, 6 years. I'm not talking about 10 years, 20 years later. Right. This is the explosion we are going to see. This 8 to 10x kind of growth in the next 5 to 7 years for the industry. That's the penetration piece I was talking about.
So when you say 10, let's say take a number of 10,000. What is the challenge, or where is the, where do you think is the reason you will, if the market is going to reach 10,000, what is the challenge, which is single largest challenge to reach that 10,000 number? Is real estate the largest challenge? Is it supply chain? Is it the dynamic of the city operate? What is the biggest challenge you face, you think, which is a stumbling block to reach that 10,000 number?
So I'm going to give you a very strange answer. Probably you don't expect it. I don't think real estate is a challenge, firstly. Okay. I think we can solve for that. I don't think supply chain or the ecosystem is there. If there's one challenge, it is talent. It's our internal ability to scale up and seize that advantage. Capital is certainly not a challenge for the well-capitalized top few brands. Okay, as you probably already have a sense. So it is now the organization itself, its ability to organize itself and scale up. So the challenge today is more internal than external.
So when you say talent is the biggest challenge, when we say that we're a country like India, which has got 1.3 billion people, and we always say that India has always been traditionally a country of farmers and shopkeepers. So why is there a talent challenge? Is it that you're not able to bring, there is no training school or skills development for people to get quality talent for region? Front-end region?
The entire ecosystem which is adjacent to us, associated industries, if you say consumer, maybe real estate, etc. These are places from where people join us, right? The difference in our industry versus the other industries is I even need my individual store manager to master a profit and loss account and think like an individual business manager, because that's the only way it will work. That necessarily is not the way folks from FMCG or other consumer goods industries work. So most of the talent which I have to grow is the hard way, which is internal,
and that takes time.
And that takes time. So Pankaj, if I were, without specific numbers, if I have to think about all the store managers I have to create for next year, the assistant store managers I have to create, there is no way I can meet even 20% of the demand internally. Okay, simple number. That's the kind of talent which I require. And if I import this talent from outside, from other industries, the first thing I need to teach them is how to manage a business, and then now start thinking about how to do it at 8x, 10x scale. Okay, so it's a huge talent challenge, and I'm simplifying it beyond talent. Also, an organization all around, including supply chain, automation, etc., needs to organize itself. But I think those are things which are more easier done than getting us ready. So, and I think as an industry, we are very cognizant of it. No retailer yet has demonstrated massive growth in 1 year. Nobody's yet shown that they can put up 100 hypermarkets in a year, Pankaj. You know the numbers I'm talking about.
But when we get to hear is that they tell us that the quality real estate is a challenge, and at the right price point is a challenge. You saying it's not.
No,
that's not the.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And my bias may come a little bit because of more because of also visibility beyond metros. But I think there is really good quality real estate available. Yes, I mean, it does take an effort. Also, outside metros, the way they're looking at monetizing their land, the way they value it, and their investment is very different. Okay, because their drivers are very different. The land must pass on from one generation to another generation, and therefore things are very different. You would have a good understanding. I don't think therefore real estate is an issue for scale.
Yeah, and I completely agree and second that with you, particularly in tier 2 onwards. Quality real estate is also available because today the number of quality occupiers who can pay rent on time on a every month-on-month basis is very few as well. There's still in tier 1, I can still say there can be likely competition, not from the same business, but another business. So, it could be a jewelry car showroom or another fashion retailer, or it could be anybody else. But in tier 2, 3, 4, quality large organizations who have ability to pay rentals on time is limited, and landlords are willing to run because we work with you very closely and we've done the expansion for you. Landlords would prefer to give it to a retailer like yourself because they are sure that they'll get the income, and they all want to preserve their property because you rightly said it's being passed on from in the family tree, and they want to live off the rental income so their family will supplement their other incomes because they don't want to part with those properties. So I completely agree with you on tier 2, 3, 4. That's not going to be so much a challenge for a well-capitalized company which has got a business model in place. Mohit, you mentioned about talent being a big key thing, and which will be a key factor for growth. You talked about real estate is not a challenge for organizations like businesses like yours. But tell me, we continue to see that the shape and form of the supermarket and hypermarket business every 3 years continues to change significantly in terms of volume of space. I remember a time when I was started servicing the hypermarkets and supermarkets business, and we used to sit with these shopping mall owners and start planning. Hypermarkets used to be those 15,000 square feet spaces, 20,000 square feet spaces. And we used to say, listen, we cannot fill up more there because the categories or SKUs available was not that many. So then you go to a smaller store, and I happened to go in the morning today to pick up my weekly, biscuits for which I enjoy with my tea in the morning and at work. And I've just walked into the next door supermarket, which is very well organized. He tries to ape the bigger guys, and the kind of SKUs he has in terms of biscuits alone is so many, which didn't exist in India at least 10, 15 years back. So, the biggest challenge was to filling up these hypermarkets, which was 15,000 square feet. Then we went to an era where we saw hypermarkets coming to be 100,000 square feet. I remember a big hypermarket opening in Whitefield, which was planned to be 100,000 square feet. And this was suddenly it had become 5 or 6 years. And probably in what 15 years and from between, I'm saying, let's take a time frame you worked in the industry from 2006 to 2021. We're back to again 15,000. We went up to 35, then 50, then we went to 100, then we came down to 50, then 35. Now we're back to again 15 or 20, and even smaller. So why is there suddenly so much transitional change which happens in the hypermarket or supermarket business every 3-4 years in terms of space requirement?
When the industry started, the simple truth is there was no precedent. So people just came in and copied what they saw in the West. In fact, for most of the industrial groups, the people leading the organizations then were expats. And they just copied what they had done in a Carrefour or a Walmart or a Tesco in India. They didn't know different. Very, very quickly, they figured out the first thing is, of course, is their cost structures don't support those kind of spaces in India. India, on a per transaction, per square feet, etc., with parity to dollar in pound, is far more expensive than Western markets. That's the simple truth. Okay, so you just couldn't do that. Of course, after that, e-commerce came and disrupted a lot of categories. So a lot of categories just simply went on to online. I mean, I have worked in my previous organization. We had a physical bookstore. We had a physical music store. Of course, all of those have gone, but also these categories have disappeared from hypermarkets, including the larger consumer electronics space. And I think the third and the most significant driver has been that we have discovered the consumer and what the consumer wants. And one simple truth of retail is, if you take a very diversified metropolitan city like Bangalore, every 4-5 kilometers, the diaspora of people living there is very different. So you'll suddenly have a catchment of 40% Tamilians versus 90% Kannadigs in one. And therefore, the assortment must reflect local taste. So we've become more efficient. We stopped copying the West. We have our own models. Okay, and we've got disrupted by a lot of categories which have completely moved online. On the flip side, we have categories now which are truly omni-channel, and where consumers buy both online and offline. So that's what's changed. And one big driver has been cost. You need to be brutally efficient, like you mentioned, low margin industry. So small is more beautiful. Take as much complexity to the back end and supply chain as you can, so the front end remains nimble. So those are probably what's driven us down to where we are. Interestingly, I think we will now see a bit of a reverse, where as we gain more confidence in the categories we deal with, we probably may counterintuitively see a slightly larger store size in the years to come.
So what is the magic formula, which is currently, you say, is the perfect model for India in terms of hypermarket business and supermarket business? What is the span in terms of space?
So first and foremost, more than spaces, you've got to be omni-channel. If you're trying to pursue a dream where you're single channel, it's in my humble view, it's a race to the bottom. Okay, so be omni-channel. The size of the store starts from what the consumer wants. So I'll give you an example. So if you take a tier 3 city, if you take, let's say, a city like Haridwar, and let's for a moment say there is no hypermarket there, the entire general trade of that city will carry about 1,100, 1,200 SKUs in FMCG. The smallest hypermarkets carry 7,000 SKUs. Okay. Now, if you come into that city new and say, I will put 7,000 on day one, you're likely to fail. Okay, so you've got to gradually build it up. So you probably go in with a 3,500, 4,000 kind of SKU list and build it up. So some of these markets which are slightly underpenetrated, I think more compact store sizes are required. And cities which have a fair bit of modern trade penetration, larger stores are required to compete, because selection also is an important metric of your consumer proposition. So depending on the catchment and the city, but for us broadly 20 to 25,000 square feet is what we play in. And there are various things which go into your share of online business, share of various categories, etc. But that's ballpark what we play in.
So do you think at some stage in India, we will reach that, when you talk about omni-channel, do you think at some stage in India, we'll reach to a very involved customer wherein there'll be no checkpoint, where you'll walk into the store, you know what you want to pick up, you just go click, 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 and it's ready at the aisle, or it gets delivered to your house. And so there'll be technology will play a big role also?
Yeah, absolutely it will. Just remember that these changes in technology have to happen at manufacturing, not at the front end.
Okay.
It's only when it starts at the manufacturing level, and that change will happen, by the way, when we get more and more shelf-ready packaging. We are still too small, as an industry from overall size perspective, again, linked to penetration. I think 5 years later, when we are 20%, those changes will start happening. And when the manufacturing level changes happen, it's very easy for us to pass through that technology to the consumer. For us to do a retrofit, I mean, it's just very, very simple way to think about it. How do I open a carton of Colgate toothpaste and retrofit, any kind of reader on top of individual packs so I can recognize the consumer? It's very difficult. I can do it, let's say for fresh food or for a very, very niche assortment, but I can't do it for scale.
Right.
Scale, it can only happen if it happens at manufacturing. And we are a little far away from reaching that scale that manufacturers will want to do it. But it will happen for sure.
So you're saying that the investment will first come from the manufacturers. They make a product, technology enabled for it to be displayed on shelves, and then front-end retail will get that, and the consumer will anyways be able to integrate with technology.
It's not about who pays for it. It's simply the most efficient way to do it, because when you're manufacturing it, that's the time when you can make any kind of change to the product, including packaging.
Because as I said, now the customer in India, particularly, we've seen is so evolved that one, obviously, with the technology prices in terms of the mobile, whether it's data or as the cost of the handset is being so low that everybody is kind of virtually enabled. Really, right from a maid in the household to a driver to a small shopkeeper in the street is also digitally enabled. And so he's a consumer at every price point. There is a consumer available. It's just that how do we able to make him get that empowerment there to make him digitally more savvy to acquire? Because not everybody can actually go through an e-commerce platform to buy. If it makes it more simpler, I'm sure the consuming class will become much more easier as well for the consumer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it'll not only, if you, as an industry, you adopt it, or as a label, you adopt it, not only will it bring the consumer closer to you, also it's far more efficient. You can lower your costs by adopting technologies like this. So it even works in favor of your P&L.
Right. So, Mohit, we spoke about the industry, you spoke about the business dynamics and the others, but tell me about, you run a very large ship, right? Because you're building so many supermarkets and hypermarkets, and I mean, it's still a manpower intensive industry, and you talked about talent as well. So how many people do you employ in your organization right now?
So we have 15,000 employees in the entire organization.
Yeah, so 15,000 employees, and I believe a lot of this will be frontline staff, right? They'll be either on the supply chain or on the frontline staff. How are you able to communicate as a leader to reach out to all of them to give a customer experience? Because ultimately a Coke is a Coke, or a Parle-G biscuit is a Parle-G biscuit, or a Colgate is a Colgate, right? But it's ultimately the customer who's coming into a more supermarket is expecting something more than going to a regular store next door, right? So how do you able to communicate as a leader with them, and how are you able to build an organization so that they can build a much more stronger proposition for getting customers in on a repeated basis?
Yeah, the simple answer is a very boring answer. Any kind of organization like this, if you have to build up to scale, your sales and operation planning processes have to be very robust, Pankaj. Okay. So without getting into too much detail, let me just tell you, whatever data I look at or some of my senior colleagues look at is the same set of data a store associate looks at every day. Okay. So we cascade the same set of metrics from top to bottom. So our rhythm of working is, with all due respect, is very similar to the Indian Army. And that rhythm of looking at everything in a similar way and aligning to the metrics is extremely important for aligning a large workforce. Now, and if you use technology and do that, okay, you're in a very, very sweet spot. And we have used a lot of technology to look at that. And that's the only thing which will keep a large ship from, chugging along and becoming larger and larger. Okay. So it all comes down to your sales and operation planning processes. They have to be robust. They have to look at the same set of data, and we have to look at it every day of the year, 365 days.
And how do you educate them to understand these matrices? Because what you could infer from these matrices is strategic decisions, but a local level whose education levels may be limited. How are they able to understand this data? So do you simplify the data for them to look at? Is there a trainings which you do continuously for them?
Yeah. So two answers to that question. Firstly, everybody at the front end uh, is pushed to look at more at input metrics rather than output metrics, because those are the ones which influence service delivery. Second is, for every level that associate goes up, we have programs to help them make that jump and that journey. So these are formal training programs. So I'll simplify it: from an associate to a supervisor, from a supervisor to a division head, from a division head to a store manager, and store manager to an area manager. All these four levels, we have formal training programs. We have assessment tests, and they're actually formally trained and to go to the next level. And without that training, it will be impossible for them to make that jump.
Right. Which is great, because as you rightly said, because talent is going to be key for you. You don't have formally educated talent on this business. What you're getting is you'll get educated talent, but you'll have to customize and make them learn from your business, which is a great investment, Mohit, and that's fantastic. So Mohit, what motivates you as a business leader to get up in the morning and drive this 15,000 people every day? What does it take for Mohit Kampani every day in the morning to get charged up? Or do you have days as well in saying, listen, yeah, last week was too hectic, let me take some time off, I'm done with these numbers? What does it take you to get up and motivated in the morning? Because in your business, you're only talking about growth now, right?
Yeah. So, Pankaj, I think various stages in life, in the retail career, there have been very different motivations. Till 5-6 years back, it was more about proving the business model, can this become profitable, etc. And now it is about, how can you prepare yourself and your team for massive scale up, because the opportunity is real and now it's beginning to unfold. So probably the most exciting time for me and my team in our retail journey, where we are seeing right in front of us and now starting to happen finally, really, really strong growth. Most of this journey, we had seen growth which was more predicated around, same store sales growth and a couple of new store openings. And now it's the other way around. Expansion is leading the growth. So it can't be a better time. Very, very excited about it. And, I know we promised not to talk about COVID, but I think the opportunity side of COVID has been that for retailers who are willing to make that investment, this is probably the best time to invest in expansion. And I know we've spoken about it offline also at some point of time. So the excitement right now all comes from growth and getting what we believe is a best consumer value proposition to more and more consumers as fast as possible. Speed is also important now.
That's music. Absolutely, that's music for us, because organizations which talk about growth and expansion, which is great. And and I can see that because I was working very closely with yourself and your team, the kind of aggressive growth which you're talking about and looking to get into markets and getting the rewards as well. So this rewards is not that it's very back-ended in saying it will come up. You're investing today, it'll come 3 or 5 years down the line. But we're seeing, I think, the rewards coming in immediately as well. But Mohit, how do you spend your personal time apart from work? Do you get time to do something, pursue some interests?
Oh yeah. So my number one interest outside of work is music. I love music. I listen to all kinds of music. Other than that, I think the other flip side of COVID has been a lot of time with my kids, getting invested in their education, their interests, helping to develop them. Those are the two, and I finally managed to go back to reading. So those are probably the three things which I do mostly outside of work.
So any good book which you did read recently, which you want to share with the viewers, which you would recommend, particularly business guys who would believe in your story of expansion and growth? Which one you would recommend? I know you gave me one last time, so I've still not picked it up. My fault. But anyone which you can recommend for the general viewers?
Yeah, so I have been reading a lot of Saurabh Mukherjee's books recently. Saurabh Mukherjee is, of course, managing director of Marcellus Capital, and while he does write a lot about investments. A lot of his books two of his books, particularly I can recommend, are a distilled wisdom on leadership. I think that's a very simple way to put it, and how to lead a more holistic lifestyle. So, for instance, as a managing director of a fund, he's talked a lot about meditation and yoga and how it helps you develop your leadership style. So I think please read the Victory Project, and the book is titled, if I'm not mistaken, 6 Steps to Peak Potential. Probably one of the best books I've read. He's written it last year. And from business as a whole, and a lot of examples of Indian businesses who have done very well over the last decade or so. Unusual Billionaires is a really good book. Again, that will help you think about your leadership style and what it makes to be successful. But 6 Steps to Peak Potential, I think, is really, really good book on developing your own personal leadership style too.
No, perfect. I know, and I've been following Saurav Mukherjee because he used to run a fund for Ambit Capital. He used to run the PMS portfolio management services business for Ambit Capital. He's definitely one of the most sought after people in the equity fund management business. But I didn't know his books were also so popular with leaders like yourselves. But great. Thank you so much, Mohit. It was great chatting up with you. And I really appreciate you taking time and sharing your vision and thought process as a business leader, and talking about the India growth story, which exists particularly beyond metros and penetrating deep. And you talked about particularly that COVID has provided us a big opportunity for people to invest back, because I think that's the time when most people should be talking about growth now. And that's fantastic. And your personal choice of author as well, which is really, really appreciated. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time. And I also would take to thank Matic India and our session partners, Acklane. Thank you so much, all of you all, for supporting this session.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj. Pleasure to speak with you as usual.